So this is a very nice verse to quote in the beginning of the class, because we realize that we're the lowest of the low. We're born into ignorance. And we offer our respectful obeisances to the spiritual master because it's the mercy of the spiritual master that will uplift us. So the spiritual master is descending in the Parampara system. And we hear in this verse that it was the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself who came to inaugurate this system, this path for the Yuga Dham. And yesterday we spoke a little about the Prayojan. We spoke on Prayojan and Sambandha, the Prayojan of attaining Krishna Prema. Today we're going to speak on the Abhidheya and Sambandha. So first, this is the system. First, one should understand the goal, what one wants to attain. And one receives knowledge of how to attain the goal. And then one chooses the path, and then one traverses the path with knowledge. Knowledge is always there. Knowledge, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami mentions that knowledge is always needed for creation. So this is the Lord's Chit potency. The Satchitananda potencies, they're spread out in the material world. They become the three modes of nature. And they're always here in their spiritual form of Samvit, Sandini, and Ladini. So I once, it's in this book that I've written, I made a formula to attain genius in mankind. And this formula is inclusive of two parts. The first part leads you to death via knowledge. Or you can expand death, so to speak, by going to the higher planets. And the second part of the formula allows you to go to the spiritual world. So this part is doing exactly the same processes, but using the Sandini, Samvit, and Ladini potencies of the Lord. So these three potencies, they have shadow potencies of the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. So time itself is in the mode of ignorance, and time is connected with the Karmakanda section. And because of the law of entropy, which rules in the material universe, time will take you down. It'll take you down to the lower regions. So the only way that you can guard against going down is to go up via attaining knowledge. So the knowledge is the Samvit potency of the Lord. Sandini energy, this becomes, we know this as eternal time, which manifests a Dham. And Sandini actually becomes temporary time in the material world. So this takes you down to the low regions, or it takes you up, depending if you connect it with knowledge, with the Samvit potency. And the Ladini aspect of the Lord, this is the bliss portion which dwells within your heart as the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Supreme Lord kindly manifests everywhere in material nature, and we're all searching for happiness. So whatever we're searching for, we're actually searching for the Lord. But we don't know it because we have a self-centered view of reality. So instead of searching for the Lord, to please the Lord, instead we're searching for happiness to please our own senses. So it's explained in the Shastra that happiness in the material world is actually ignorance. So one can never attain happiness in the material world, and instead one is just getting more and more ignorant. The more one searches for happiness, the more one becomes self-centered and selfish. But spiritual life is selfless. So we see in this word, selfish, it's the counterpart of the selfless. So the self part is easy to understand. That's ahamameti, I am this body. And the ish part is the Ishvara. We would like to be the supreme controller. So when we are selfish, we see ourself as the center of reality, And we like to think that we're the controller and doer of our destiny and our activities. And all of these ultimately lead to death. Mrityu sarvasya charaha aham. So the Lord mentions that He is death. If you want to escape death, you must find the process. So the process was given in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I'd like to speak a little about this path that we all follow, which is the Vaidhi Bhakti, according to chanting of the holy names of the Lord. A chanting of the holy names of the Lord is, it's not a path of Vaidhi Bhakti. It's a path of that takes you through Vaidhi Bhakti. When you consider the holy names of the Lord with some material contamination, but when you understand the holy names are absolutely pure and spiritual, you find that those holy names are pregnant with the pastimes of the Lord. So those same holy names you're chanting, they actually they create a spontaneous attraction within your heart for Sri Krishna. Sorry, I have the flu, so I took a tablet, and that tablet makes your mouth dry, so occasionally I'll stop for. So I'd like to explain a few things. I hope I have some time. I might go over time here so that I can fit in what I would like to convey to you guys, so that you'll be better equipped on this path of the path to perfection, shall we say. So let me explain first about the wind-down process that occurs in the body. The Lord has made the body as a machine. He mentions yantra rudhani mayaya in the 18th chapter. So this body is a machine made from material elements. So throughout the day, your body is constantly taking in information from the senses of the body. That information then needs to be processed and stored accordingly so that you can use it in the future from different references. So to do that, one must go from the conscious reality to the subconscious and then to the unconscious reality. And as one's chitta, one's intellect, goes down into the deeper regions, one loses consciousness. But at that time, the body has a certain autonomous region which will continue the life of the body, and it will allow you to process information and store them accordingly. So everyone knows that when you're going to sleep, this is the wind-down process from the conscious realms to the subconscious realms. When you're going to sleep, first you're from your waking state. This is called the beta state of life. We have different brain rhythms, and each brain rhythm is according to a specific language which connects with you through the intelligence. You are the super soul. You are the soul with the super soul. So let me explain the brain rhythms just very briefly. In the low end of the spectrum, you start from 0, which is death or birth, and then the brain rhythms go up to certain megahertz per cycle, and as they're going up, they're causing vibrations to go faster and faster. As they go faster, the waves themselves, the amplitude gets smaller and smaller. And they have less power, but they're moving faster. So it's going towards passion. As they move down the spectrum, they're going slower, but their waves are getting higher. So the compression of them allows them to move faster, and the expansion of them allows them to move slower, but gets higher. So the effect of something getting higher or more powerful is that it can pull you in that direction. So this is specific. The Lord's arranged the body in such a way that you are supposed to go down into the lower realms in order for you to rejuvenate your body and then process different informations. So at the bottom end of the spectrum, we have the delta brain rhythm. This delta brain rhythm allows you to enter into the deep unconscious realms. So it's mentioned that the Lord himself is manifest in 3 phases: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And it's mentioned that if you want to go back to Godhead, one has to know the Lord in these 3 phases. So how one does that, one sees the Lord in the waking consciousness, which is this beta brain rhythm I mentioned. Then one has an opposite side of that, which is a dreaming consciousness, this astral realm, which is equivalent to, one can access this through the springboard of the theta brain rhythm, this dreaming state. So one also has to know the Lord with the intellect in the dream state. So if you think you're becoming an advanced devotee, this is an easy checkpoint. That is, do you remember the Lord every minute of the day in waking consciousness? Do you act for the Lord's pleasure in waking consciousness? If you do that, then you see that the Lord is not only in his deity form in the temple room, but you also see that the Lord is manifest within everyone's heart. And then further, you see the Lord is manifest in every creature's heart. And Narada Muni mentions that one should treat all creatures as one's brothers and sisters, because he mentions even a fly, how little difference there actually is between the fly and yourself in relation to being a brother. So if one decides one would like to kill a creature because it's getting in your way, it's bothering you, there must be some retribution for that, even a mosquito. So if a mosquito is attacking you, at that point you can do something about it. But if you just go in the room and you switch on this mosquito killer on this electric power point, at that time you will be held accountable for your actions. Even if you're a sannyas, it doesn't matter who you are, you'll not go back to Godhead. Instead, you'll be held accountable for your actions. We should know these things. It's not that we're divine creatures, we can do what we want, and then the Lord doesn't care about it because we're devotees, we're the special ones. No, it's simply that every creature is our brother, and we should understand this. A brother in the sense that we're all trying to be the enjoyers. Actually, in another sense, we are the enjoyed, and that's in the feminine, prakriti. But Narada Muni specifically mentions brothers because he understands every creature is in a false state of consciousness. So in other words, one must see the Lord everywhere, and then in dreams, one also sees the Lord. There's such a thing called half-life of a drug. So if you take a drug, that drug has an effect. Then when the effects wear off from that drug, you then have that drug in the system for half of the time that it was active in the body. And that drug is still influencing you in a subtle way. So this is called the half-life. So similarly, when you are seeing the Lord in the external realms, you also begin to see the Lord in your dreams. You begin to see the same things as you see externally, the Sankirtan movement, the devotees. And this specifically occurs when you are serving the Lord more and more, or when you're in separation from the devotees. When you're not connected with the devotees, my wife and I, we live on a very small island, very recluse lifestyle, and we dream of devotees constantly. Because we are not with the devotees, we're constantly dreaming of the devotees, and we hear the Bhagavatam over and over and over and over again, narrated by Malabhaktadas. So because of hearing this, and not actually being with the devotees, we tend to dream of the devotees a lot, dream of kirtans and different things. So this is Shishi Radha Landaneshwara ki, Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Then there is the third state, which is called the deep unconscious realms, which is in the mode of ignorance. And the Supreme Lord dwells within the heart in a place that is surrounded by light. It's called Sweta Dweep. It's the white island within your heart. Surrounding that is the blackness of Lord Shiva in the form of Rudra. So one has to go through this blackness, through the mode of ignorance, through this subconscious, through the unconscious realms, and with the chitta, with the consciousness, the intellect, one has to illuminate one's path. And this is given in the story of Arjuna in something around chapter 81 of the 10th canto, where Arjuna was trying to protect the children of some Brahmin. And he had to go through, with Lord Krishna, he had to go through the vast expanse of darkness. And he got very scared. He had a lot of fear. At this time, even Lord Krishna's horses, they also had fear. They were going to visit Garbhodakshai Vishnu. But instead of going through the planetary system downwards, they went upwards through Brahmaloka, and they went up to Dhruvaloka, and then around the back of the universe. So we hear that the universe, half of it is water, the universe. A good portion of it is darkness, air, and then only a certain portion is manifest. The Dhruvaloka planet, that's in the middle of the universe, and we see it at the top of the universe. So if it's in the middle and at the top at the same time, there must be a lot more around the back. So as the universe is a globe shape, the Dhruvaloka is at the top. Arjuna went up to Brahmaloka, and then he went behind the universe where there's total darkness. And to save him from his fears, Lord Krishna used his Sudarshan chakra to illuminate his path. And then he wasn't scared and the horses didn't get lost, and then he went underwater to see Mahavishnu. So we should understand that the light which illuminates that darkness is the Mahamantra. The Mahamantra is the light which we follow, which our consciousness follows. It's the Sudarshan chakra. So if we don't follow the Mahamantra, when we try to take our consciousness down, because our intellect is very weak, it's not so powerful. Instead, we get illusioned, and firstly, the pulling power of the lower brain rhythms drags us into sleep. And in the sleep state, we see dreams, and those dreams then take our mind away to different directions. Whatever we dream of, that's our chitta, our intellect, actually illuminating that realm. And therefore, wherever we're thinking of, we are in that place. Our mind goes there, and that's where we are. You hear the story of the chariot. The mind is the intelligence is the driver. The mind is the senses are the horses, and the intelligence is the driver, and the mind's the chariot, and the senses are the horse. So this whole idea of this is that one needs to use the intelligence to control this chariot and to direct it in the correct places. So if one is following one's intellect, one's consciousness, one is in that place. So if one's trying to chant the Mahamantra and instead one is following the intellect, one's seeing other things, then one is not actually illuminated by the Mahamantra. So instead one will get lost. And then there's always a downward push. When you go downwards, you then enter into the darkness and you don't know what's happening. So you lose consciousness. There's so much fear in there that your body actually loses consciousness. This was explained that Arjuna was actually losing his consciousness. So one has to be aware of the Lord in this realm also. The Supersoul dwells in these three realms. So in the mode of ignorance, it's this darkness. In the mode of goodness, it's the dreaming state. And in the mode of passion, one sees the Lord in the waking consciousness. And to assist us in that matter, we have 3 ways of chanting. One can chant loudly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. So this chanting is chanting from the mode of passion, from this passionate world we live in, from this rhythm. And we need to chant like this in the beginning in order to fix our attention on the Maha Mantra, in order to get used to something. The body is made in such a way that when one does an activity, one tends to do that same thing again and again via remembrance. So one gets used to something and then one can remember it and perform it again and again very easily because you know the path to follow. Then there is another way of chanting. Maybe you can do this. It's very quiet. It's called muttering sometimes. So this is chanting to oneself. And one does this when one wants to enter into one's own body. So the outside world doesn't exist. It's a complete illusion. So don't bother to try and go to the Lord using the external path of Pravritti Marg. If you try to do that, it's said that one has to attain 100 perfect births. Then one takes a position of Brahma again for the second time. And then one can perfect one's life as Brahma and go back to Godhead. So you have to live 100 perfect births. We can't even live perfect for 1 hour. It's pretty tough. So don't try that path. And there's nothing out there anyway. So the path of Nivritti is the path that devotees take. And this second way of chanting is allowing you to take your consciousness inside. And it's mentioned that there are a lot more benefit from chanting softly. There is I've heard 2 things. I've heard 100 times more beneficial and 1,000 times more beneficial. And then one can chant again in a deeper state. And at this time, one should know what one's doing. So it's not that you do this and it will have effect. Instead, it'll have the counter effect. If you do something and you do it wrong, in the spiritual life, it's like a razor's edge. So if you slightly go wrong, you'll hurt and cut yourself. So the silent way of chanting japa, and this is what is called japa, that must be accompanied by smaranam, according to Jiva Goswami. So smaranam means you're remembering the Lord's pastimes. So this is done through trying to meditate on the qualities of the Lord. And you do that through hearing the Bhagavatam, through hearing the Maha Mantra. And because the Maha Mantra is actually is pregnant with all the pastimes of the Lord, one doesn't have to go outside of the Maha Mantra. So you might not hear this, but I'm going to demonstrate how to chant in the mind. Good, eh? You all took notice? But did you notice I was also thinking of the Lord? So this is what the 3 ways of chanting, and chanting silently is 1,000 times more beneficial again. So chanting silently, one has to be qualified to do this. And if one isn't qualified, instead the mind will wander. And when you go into this depths of the unconscious realms, how are you going to remain conscious if you have not enough spiritual strength? It's known that when one chants inattentively, 4 things happen. Firstly, one has hridaya dubalyam, weakness of heart. One becomes spiritually weak when one chants inattentively. Secondly, one makes offenses to the holy name of the Lord. There are 10 offenses. And it's mentioned the 11th offense to be inattentive. So if one is inattentive, and it's a very great science to be attentive, so one shouldn't think it's a very simple thing. It's a great science. The next thing is one becomes covered by the material energy. So Maya will delude you in some way. She'll allow you to think anything you want to think, that you're wonderful, that you have this nice automobile, or you have this nice position. The things that you desire, you always go to Durga Devi to attain those desires. And Durga Devi gives these, it's called capricious. It's deceitful. She gives you these benedictions in order to deceive you, in order to take you away from Krishna. And these come from chanting inattentively. One then becomes attracted to material nature. One makes offenses. One becomes spiritually weak. And then the fourth thing that happens, which is the most devastating of all, is that it encourages one to make more offenses. So it's like this vicious circle that one doesn't get out of. So the only way to get out of that is to be attentive. So these three ways of chanting, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned that devotees should chant loud. So this is the path, following the path of Vaidhi Bhakti. Yesterday we described the path of Raganuga a little bit in relation to our prayojan, which is to attain Krishna Prema. And Lord Chaitanya himself, he came to inaugurate the Sankirtan. So we should look at what Lord Chaitanya was doing. And he was, the Yugadam, he was chanting Mahamantra and helping everyone else to chant Mahamantra. Yesterday we explained that knowledge is not actually received correctly and has its effect unless you give that to others. And knowledge is an aspect of bhakti. So knowledge is an agent for bhakti, Bhakti Devi. It's called the chit potency of the Lord, and that's subservient to the Ladini Shakti of the Lord. Ladini Shakti is what gives the Lord pleasure. So the knowledge aspect has got to be there to give the Lord pleasure. But it's the activity of giving the Lord pleasure which is the primary thing. So, it's also been explained by Srila Haridas Thakur that chanting the Mahamantra loudly is thousands and thousands of times more beneficial than chanting the Mahamantra silently. So we see there's an absolute contradiction there, in that you get a lot more benefit from chanting silently, and the mind has to go down to these deep realms, so you have to do it. You must go down there with smaranam, with full consciousness, with remembrance of the Lord, with your mind focused on the Mahamantra, following behind the Mahamantra. But it's much more beneficial if you chant loud. So this is dichotomy of the spiritual life. So in other words, the Yuga Dharma is to taste Krishna Prema oneself and to give that out to others. So there are two aspects there. There is your personal life, your personal connection with the Lord, and then how does that translate into affecting other people, into uplifting other people. If you really want to access Krishna's mercy, then not Durga Devi, but Lakshmi Devi, she will give you these honest benedictions, and something you receive, like, let me give an example of Govinda. I knew Govinda when he wanted to learn harmonium, when he desired to learn it. Then he learned it, and then he learned the accordion. So that was a benediction. His desire was fulfilled from Lakshmi Devi. Lakshmi Devi herself, not Durga Devi, because he used that always in the Lord's service. So you see the difference. When you get a real benediction of the material energy, when you get a real desire fulfilled, that desire takes you and others to Lord Krishna. So if one thinks one's good at anything, don't throw it away. Use that in service of the Lord. Unless it's taking you away, then that's from Durga Devi. Yeah. So the idea of chanting loud Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is to assist everybody else to remember Krishna. So by doing that, the Lord is so pleased. The path that we're on is not the path of perfection according to sadhana siddhi. One can do it, but the path we're on is actually via the mercy principle. So we take mercy and we give mercy. This is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. Everything stemming from Lord Chaitanya. And Srila Prabhupada so kindly left his bhajan. He'd already attained perfection. He was meditating on the Astakaliya Leela, the intimate pastimes of the Lord at the eightfold different intervals, the vandanas. But he kindly left that meditation. So can you imagine what a thing it is to, when you're there, you get extreme bliss. You get the sattvikas, the bhavas, sattvika bhavas. So he's feeling some very nice feelings in his body. He's understanding that this is such a taste that I don't want to leave this. And he's knowing that his position is to be in that state. It is to actually serve the Godhead, Krishna, through his spiritual form. So he'd got to the stage of apanadas. This is the fifth stage of remembrance. He was actually serving the Lord in Vrindavan Dham, and he left it. And can you imagine the West? That interferes with your bhajan so much. It's mentioned that the sadhana siddhis, they don't even take prasadam in a temple like Govindaji or Gopal if that food, if the money for that food, which is cooked by devotees and offered to a strict regime by the priests, and then that is then considered prasadam. If the money is given by a king or some wealthy man, that will disturb the bhajan of the sadhana siddhis. And they're already perfected or close to it. So just the slightest material energy, just seeing the face of a malecha pollutes you. And then it's mentioned one has to take bath in the Ganges to remove that sin from the mind. So this is a type of perfection that was attained by Srila Prabhupada. And he left that to come and see all of us malechas, all of us very uncouth people. And it was very kind. So actually all glories of everything, of every devotee must go to Srila Prabhupada. Not for now, but for thousands of years in the future. The ISKCON movement will become so popular on the planet that one day every bit of spiritual information that anyone receives will be coming through Srila Prabhupada, through his mercy. At one point, Srila Prabhupada's teachings are so correct that at one point every bit of spiritual information on the planet will be somehow channeled through these teachings of Prabhupada. So we owe a lot to Prabhupada, everything. Anyway, so these are some of the things that happen. The wind down process is one goes from beta to alpha. Alpha means that one becomes relaxed. Then one goes to theta, this realm where one dreams. In the alpha state, one will start producing some dopamine, different chemicals, endorphins, and neuropeptides. One has a central nervous system, a peripheral and a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, that's in place when one needs to be in a heightened state of consciousness. If one needs to react, one needs to react quickly. So this nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, it allows one to react very quickly to a given stimulus. But when one doesn't want to react, one needs the opposite. So one needs a parasympathetic nervous system in place. So that goes in place when one starts relaxing, one goes down to alpha. From there, drugs are released in the body to help you maintain that state. And then further drugs like dopamine are released, so one goes down further. And these drugs actually dope you up and pull you. And the brain waves themselves, they pull you further and further down. Then you go into theta. In theta brain rhythm, you start this dreaming state. In the dream state, you then take the information that you receive from the conscious realms, you put it into different language. Each brain rhythm has its own language. So one then starts thinking of pictures, and one sees dreams. We know this hypnagogic imagery. Then one goes down into the delta and one goes to sleep. In that realm, one is to recuperate. So the theta brain rhythm allows you to process information and store it. And then in the delta brain rhythm, in the early hours of the night, one's supposed to recuperate one's body. So when you're going to sleep, one should do this in a systematic way. So if you go to bed, for instance, at 9 o'clock, then you wind down, you go into delta in the early hours of the morning, and then you come back into theta, you start dreaming, then you come back into alpha, you feel happy, then back into beta, you wake up nicely. If that process of going down and coming back up is interfered with, for instance, if you go in bed later at night, then you go into delta later in the morning, then you come out into theta later and alpha later, and then you can't wake up in the morning. And if you wake up, if your alarm rings and you're still in the lower realms, then you become very bad-tempered, because each brain rhythm has a positive and a negative, so it has side effects. So the theta brain rhythm, although it has a positive of allowing you to be creative and do some playing on the subconscious realms, it's like a springboard for you to enter into with your mind into the astral world. It also has a side effect, and that side effect is you become bad-tempered, you become erratic and ratty, they say, you know. So these things are there. If you become too much in the way of the beta brain rhythm, then you become very organized, but you become pedantic. You have to have everything your way. It has to be correct how you see it, and you can't see the world through other eyes. You then tend to see things how you want. So why I'm mentioning these things is, it's important for you to regulate your sleeping correctly. That means you go in bed at one time and wake up at one time, and keep that regular. That helps you to chant because you're in the right frame of mind. Then don't eat at a certain time, because if you eat later, then the body has to digest those, so that stops the process of winding down and coming back up. And that will allow your mind also to be wild. The chariot is out of control because the mind is out of control, because the senses are out of control. Yesterday we mentioned a little about the importance of desire, the importance of simple living, high thinking, because desiring something takes your potency, it takes your life, and that covers your intelligence then. Your intelligence is not strong enough to focus on Krishna. So the same thing when one disturbs this natural cycle of going down and coming up, one's mind again becomes erratic. So why am I mentioning these things at all? What have they got to do with the Yuga Dharma and chanting? So when we're chanting the Maha Mantra, we must follow the same system of winding down. Because when we do something, we remember it. The body's like a machine. It just goes back to that state again and again and again and again and again. So as we're chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. If we start becoming relaxed, the sound vibrations repeated over and over again. At that time, the body will think, this is the wind-down cycle. Now I'm supposed to shoot over to the next nervous system. Now I'm supposed to release chemicals in the body. And we're supposed to go down. So I'll do my duty, and it does its duty very nicely. And then you start feeling relaxed. As you're relaxed, you're not focusing your mind on the Maha Mantra, because the relaxed brain rhythm is the alpha brain rhythm, and the focusing brain rhythm is the beta brain rhythm. So if you start becoming relaxed and you're not taking your consciousness from the beta brain rhythm, your intellect, you're not taking it down with you, instead your mind will start wandering, because that's a duty of the mind, to always wander around and to search for something that's going to make you happy. It's always oscillating from accepting or rejecting something. And it's in cahoots with the intelligence, which is always looking for similarities or differences in the circumstances that you've come across prior. So there's an immediate danger if you don't take your conscious intellect with you and you don't try. So the danger is called pramada, which is inattention. Pramada comes in three ways. So you have pramada according to, this is back to what Thakur mentions in Harinam Chintamani, according to vikshepa, which means you are distracted from objects of the external world. So you're chanting Mahamantra, your eyes are open, you start thinking of things, your thoughts are then busily organizing your day and what to do. And this is called distraction with your eyes open due to something external, in the external realm. Someone in the temple might be doing something, you just look over there and you're distracted. And from there your mind will take you to the next point and the next and the next and the next. And with your determination, this is a faculty of the mind, to discrimination and determination. You actually need to bring your conscious attention back to the mantra. If you don't, it will wander further and further away. Then you have Audasenia, which is from this alpha brain rhythm, where you then start releasing chemicals in your body. Because you're a little bit relaxed, you become what's called lapse or lapsidaisical in your attempts. And this is called inattention due to apathy. So in this case, your attempts at controlling the mind become absolutely pathetic. And they're pathetic because you don't try. Instead, you revel in the chemicals that are being released in your body. You start enjoying your chanting. And you enjoy it because the mind is wandering wherever it wants to wander. And chemicals are being released and you think it's great. You think, I'm chanting Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna. I've got all these thoughts of these business enterprises. I've got all these thoughts of how I'm going to be the superhero of everything today. And these things happen. And you're just pathetic. You know, you're not chanting the Maha Mantra at all at this time. Not you, of course, you're great. But when you're doing this, so Prabhupada said, just try. Just keep trying and trying and trying. Trying means your conscious attention. It must be fixed. Do not allow the body to have this wind-down cycle. But at the same time, you must have this wind-down cycle. So here's a contradiction again. You must have it, but the body will trick you and pull you further down. So then you have another distraction, which is called jadya, which means a distraction due to laziness. This is due to inertia. One starts to feel very sleepy. One starts to actually fall asleep. You know, these things are happening. So why are they happening? The point is that you have a device in your brain. If you take your spine, you go to the top of the spine, somewhere inside your head, in the middle of your head, there's a little device. It's the size of one green pea. So this is called the reticular activating system, the RAS. So this system, all information from the conscious realms, from the senses, or from the subconscious realms, wherever the mind is going gathering information, it goes to that one point. And then you form a response to that given stimulation. So whatever you need to do, you do according to the programming of the RAS, the RAS. So the RAS has a special function in that it needs to be programmed every moment. And if it's not programmed, it runs according to pre-programmed things. So this autonomous thing, like when you're driving a car, when you're beginning to drive a car in the beginning, the RAS tells you, you must actually be attentive to the road, and you must check your mirrors and put your hands and your feet and everything. So at that time, you have to use the beta brain rhythm to be focused. You also need alpha to be relaxed so you're not too tense. If you're too tense, you go to the high beta, which is vibrating very fast, and then you are ready for some action that might come quickly, and then you might be nervous at that time. So it's better to be relaxed while you're driving. So once you've learned that, then the feet and the hands and everything, that goes to the autonomous region, and automatically it goes on. So the RAS tells you, yes, just put your feet like this and that and this and that, just automatic, very simple. And then your conscious attention can be placed on either the person eating crisps in the back or the person on the road. It's mentioned that, when was this? This was back when I was a young boy. On the radio, it was mentioned that, I think it just said the majority of all cars stolen in England was something like blue Ford Escorts. This was the highest amount of cars that were stolen. And I was thinking, why is it that this car was stolen more than others? And the reason is because there was more of this car at that time. Everybody was buying blue Ford Escorts. So when something's in the majority, then that is seen more and more. And similarly, it was mentioned that, so the idea of this is that the conscious attention will pick up on something. One will see it and it'll fit into the picture. It was also mentioned on that same time that the majority of accidents on the road are caused, and they take place in the summer, and they're caused by men looking at girls with short skirts. So their conscious attention was diverted. The thieves see this blue car and they steal it. The male are looking at the off the road. So their conscious attention is diverted. So one has to be always conscious and understand there is an autonomous region. There is something that goes on automatically. But if you're not conscious of something, one will be end in trouble, shall we say. And then there are these three types of chanting inattentively and 4 types of defects that happen accordingly. So, when one is chanting the Maha Mantra, this reticular activating system is being programmed. How is it being programmed? It's programmed by every one of your actions at every moment. So if we hear some noise that's a recurrent noise over and over again, we all know this. Somebody is now cleaning back there. And you hear the mopping or the sweeping or different things. And because it's a sound that has no particular relevance to our progression as a species, then we don't need to pay attention to it. So instead, the RAS says, yes, dear ears, just ignore this sound. First, it works out what it is. When it first hears it, it tries to associate that noise with what it's seen before. It'll then make a picture of somebody cleaning, and then it says, okay, that's what it is, so ignore that sound. And instead, put your attention on the speaker of the Bhagavatam, because there's something there that is very good for your spiritual advancement. So when we hear a sound that's repetitive, we always program the RAS to either be alert or not to be alert. So when we're chanting the Maha Mantra, it's the same sound over and over again for 2 hours. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So this sound, we tend to say, okay, what happened a minute ago when we're chanting this sound? Well, we were thinking of this special thing we're going to do today. That's where I was in the story. So let me rejoin that story right at that point so I can continue. And the mind then continues the story. This Maha Mantra, it's puts to the autonomous region, it's automatic chanting, then you're not paying attention, then the mind can start wandering more and more, then this wind down process that's inbuilt in you can go on, and your consciousness will go down into alpha, then into theta, and probably not in delta, in the middle of the temple. Although some people do collapse. That means they've fallen asleep so much that they can't control their body anymore. It's just gone. So this RAS needs to be programmed correctly. How do you do that? You can do it in different ways. You can do it by determination, by conscious endeavor, or you can do it by a technique. There's one technique that I came up with 10 years ago, actually now. This technique allows you to go down into the lower realms, but taking with you the beta brain rhythm, the alpha brain rhythm, the theta brain rhythm. It allows you to take them down while following the Maha Mantra. So a technique like that must not go outside of the Maha Mantra. So what things can you do when you're chanting Maha Mantra? Jiva Goswami mentions one must perform smaranam. That means remember, so you're doing something when you're chanting Maha Mantra. So in the beginning, Prabhupada said, just hear. So that's what you're doing. You're telling the RAS, I must hear this Maha Mantra. But then one has to go down. This is Pravritti Marg. This is allowing you to get over this Anarta Nivritti stage. When you're attentive to the Maha Mantra, you're connecting with the spiritual realm. As you're connecting with the spiritual realm, you're then removing the doubts from your heart. You're removing the impurities, and you're becoming Chaitanya, clearer and clearer. So it must be there, the loud chanting. But as you progress as a devotee, you must also understand that there is a path, and Godhead is not external. Yes, you can perform the Harinam Sankirtan, the Yuga Dham, you can perform that externally, but you can't, the Godhead isn't actually out there. The Lord is actually inside, in the spiritual realm with you. So Lord Chaitanya has kindly manifested the spiritual realm externally in the mood of the Harinam Sankirtan. So it's said that the rasa dance is where the gopis surround the Lord and they're dancing with the Lord in the center. So that rasa dance then has taken shape as the Harinam Sankirtan. So when you're performing the Harinam Sankirtan, it is non-different from the rasa dance in Krishna Lila. This is Shastra, it's not me saying this. But you have to be there, you have to be remembering Krishna, you have to be glorifying Krishna, you have to want to give others Krishna. This compassion in your heart has to grow so much that you see, Jeev Jago, Gaura Chandra Bole, wake up sleeping souls, Lord Gauranga's calling. So the Lord is actually calling you. So you actually are an emissary, are a vehicle for the Lord's love to come through. This is directly this rasa, the rasa dance, the dance of engaging in emotion with the Lord, which is to please the Lord. What pleases the Lord in this age? Harinam Sankirtan. But as we mentioned in the very beginning of the first class yesterday, that this Krishna Prema, this is what the Lord came to give, which is two parts, Harinam Sankirtan and tasting. So one has to do this. So the chanting of the Maha Mantra, that's our personal affair. That's our internal affair with Lord Krishna. So if you're doing that, do it properly. Haridas Thakur was chanting 3 lakhs of rounds. And it's well known that he chanted 1 lakh loud, 1 lakh muttering, and 1 lakh silent. So he did that to show you that actually that's the path. That is the path to attain love of Godhead. But his stress, his emphasis was on chanting loud. And when you hear of pastimes with Haridas Thakur, you always hear them in connection with him giving mercy to others. You don't hear much that he was sat under the tree and chanting. You just hear that related to as a reference point. But it's kind of boring from that point, isn't it? Nothing happens. He just sits there and chants. So you hear of him delivering the prostitute. You hear of him being the guru of Maya Devi. You hear of him in the marketplace getting beaten because he wants so much to give Krishna Prema to everyone. So in other words, this was the emphasis of Haridas Thakur's life. This, and then for devotees themselves in this internal realm, he's showing also that one must chant. So Prabhupada mentioned that we are all sick in this world. Here's the pharmacist giving the prescription. I have to finish soon because I've gone. Let me see. It's already 5 to 9. There are hundreds more things, but... Oh, is it? So I'm not actually as crazy as I think. Oh, good. I was a little worried then. Where was I? Okay, yes, we went through this, getting beaten in the marketplace, etc., etc. So this whole idea of of devotees actually making it back to Godhead. There is a science. That science comes through the Abhidhya. Abhidhya is the path of chanting. I've mentioned just a few things just to help you to be aware of this. The more you're aware of things, the more that you can then use your intellect, use your determination to remain fixed on this. I mentioned about the technique. That technique I won't be teaching to people. It's a very, very serious thing. To control the mind, Arjuna said, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So if it's that difficult, you can understand that a technique is also quite, one has to be true to the path. So this technique allows you to go down into the lower realms, taking the Mahamantra with you. And Srila Prabhupada, that's where I was at this point. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that if we are diseased, then we should take the medicine that's prescribed, which is chanting the Mahamantra. That medicine, Prabhupada said, if you're more crazy, you have to take more of that medicine. So, in other words, he said you should chant 64 rounds a day. So we think 16 rounds a day is difficult. Why is it difficult? Because we're not getting a taste. Why are we not getting a taste? Because instead we're producing all these different dopamine type chemicals to dope us up. And we're just allowing ourselves to be so weak, so spiritually pathetic, that we allow a few little small drugs in our body to conquer our determination. Don't do it. Don't allow these things. Be fixed. Don't allow Maya to take your attention away. Be fixed in the outside realm. Understand that you're a sinful creature and that your sins will be removed by chanting the Mahamantra. Therefore, chant more. The more you chant, the more you'll find it's blissful. The more you engage in material activities, the more you'll find chanting is not blissful, because chanting is in the mode of goodness. Material activities are in the mode of passion. So when you try to go from passion to goodness, you find that goodness is bitter. It's mentioned in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that goodness is bitter like poison in the beginning. And then later it becomes nectar. So the more you chant, then the more you actually get it in touch with the Lord. The more you get in touch with the Lord, the more you get purified. The more you get purified, the more you want to chant. The more you want to chant, the more you please the Lord. The more you please the Lord, the more the Lord gives you power to chant. And it's this not vicious circle, but a kind circle. It's the other end of the spectrum. And it's very easy to attain for us, because we're devotees of Krishna. If we're devotees of Krishna, we love Krishna. If we love Krishna, no problems. Lord Chaitanya mentioned that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned that a devotee chants the names of God because he's the husband and we are the wife. And the wife always does, unless they're Western. Sometimes the Western wives don't do what their husband wants. Sometimes they do. But in a good stance, the Western wife also does what the husband wants. So we're Prakriti, we're feminine in relation to the Lord, we're the enjoyed. The Lord is the enjoyer. So the Lord is supposed to enjoy our chanting, not turn his face, what's this Maya, what's this nonsense happening? The Lord is within us, and he's the one we're supposed to be giving pleasure to. Because we're the wife of the Lord, and we're in this, I won't mention it, because actually I shouldn't mention it, I should mention the other thing. The Lord came to give the 4 rasas, it's mentioned. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that chanting the Mahamantra, we're entitled to have a relationship with the Lord in the Madhurya category, which is this Krishna Prema we discussed in the first day yesterday. So this Parakiya Rasa, where one is married, but one then has a lover, and that lover is the Lord. This is the highest taste. This can be attained by a devotee. So also the other 4 rasas. The Lord came to give the 4 rasas. So I mentioned a few things. I could go on more and more. Also, I can allow the class to move a little and ask some questions. It's mentioned by Jiva Goswami that the mind, it should be like iron filings are attracted to a magnet. The mind should be attracted to Krishna's holy name in the same way. So when one's chanting, one should be attracted to the Lord. One should relish this holy name of the Lord. So in other words, try and work yourself into a position where you can relish that, where you can be in the association of devotees. There is a certain geometric, yesterday did I mention in this class or not? Anyway, in relation to the progression of the human species, I mentioned about the 3 levels of the universe, and the second level is more in the realm of the Akash, the ether. And in this level, one can do different things than one can do in the physical realm. So, so when one's chanting the Mahamantra, one also becomes advanced. One comes to the point where one goes into this dream realm. In this dream realm, one shouldn't start to do things that you do in the dreams where your conscious attention is not able to fix itself. Instead, one should see Krishna in these realms. When your mind starts to see pictures, actually there's a thing called eidetic imagery, which is that you see pictures in your mind. You see form. It's from the Greek word idios, which means form. And when one goes down, then one automatically starts to see pictures because one thinks with the mind rather than the conscious intellect. And then that's the right hemisphere of the brain. So these pictures naturally come. So those pictures should be in relation to the Lord. So one can do these things. One can picture the Lord. One can picture the deity form. One can picture the Mahamantra. But this seeing form in the mind, because of the Western schooling, it's drilled out of you from school up over. So when you're young, you're naturally born with a very good imagination. Kids are playing with toys and they have imaginary friends. They're seeing this. This is a whole reality they see within their mind. And they're experiencing it. So when we're chanting the Mahamantra, we should practice to see the Lord. We should practice to see form again. We forgot how to do it because we're becoming dry and very dull, like a stone becomes hard. When our hearts become hard, we also become solidified and we can just see what's in front of us. But we should try and picture the Mahamantra, see the deity inside. Focus one's attention on hearing the Mahamantra. You can oscillate between different things, but the general idea is that you shouldn't just think that you're on one level and that's going to be the end of it. You should actually try and see what is in the inner realms. In relation to mankind's progression, they're going into the next evolution, which is in relation to geometry. So there is one shape called the vector equilibrium. This vector equilibrium is made from 64 tetrahedrons. In relation to yantras, the tetrahedron, I've noticed, is always there. It's symbolizing the Godhead. This pyramid you see in Egypt, they're put around the planet specifically for a reason. So these tetrahedrons, when you have 64 of them put together, you form this vector equilibrium. This vector equilibrium is a certain shape where from any point on it you have perfect equilibrium, you have perfect balance. It's 60 degrees from the center to any one of its vertices. It has all the perfections so that when it's put in the smallest form or when it's put in its largest form, it's still perfect in anywhere. And you always have a central point in there. Wherever you are, when it expands more and more and more, wherever you are, you have a central point, and every place is a center. Because as you look out from every place, it's perfectly symmetrical, just like a circle. When you're in the center, it's called point Bindu. You know, it's mentioned by Kadama Muni about this meditating on point Bindu. One should take one's attention to this place. So there are also ways of chanting Mahamantra, and one should take one's conscious attention. I won't mention these because it can get a little too much for a Bhagavatam class if I start mentioning about certain things where you put your conscious attention. But this vector equilibrium, it's 64 tetrahedrons. This word 64 it's no mistake. It's a perfect geometric number. It's the perfect symmetry where you always have the Godhead in the center. And surrounding the Lord, you have 64 arts and sciences. Those 64 arts and sciences all represent one of the gopis who surround the Lord in the rasa dance. There are originally 8. Those 8 expand into 16. Those 16 expand into 64. Therefore, that number 64, nirbanda, it means to remove a knot within the heart. That knot is the knot of affection. That affection is for material nature. You have to change that affection for material nature so it becomes affection for Krishna, who's actually in the center. When every person thinks that they're the center of reality, this egocentric view of life, they're actually correct. There is some truth in this. They are in the center of the universe. Because Shridakshay Vishnu is in the center of them. So as Shridakshay Vishnu is in the center of every living being, so that is the center of the universe. Where you find Shridakshay Vishnu, you always find the center of the universe. So this vector equilibrium is the perfect geometric shape that shows the central point at everywhere you placed. So this is no coincidence that the number 64 is given. And Srila Prabhupada wanted everyone to chant 64, and until Srila Prabhupada came, that was the standard for all Vaishnava devotees. Because it's a sacred number, it's a holy number, and one must, the whole universe is not haphazardly thrown together. It's extremely scientifically arranged and, symmetric. So this 64, Prabhupada arranged, he asked first 32, 16. He didn't say 17, he didn't say 25, he didn't say 33. He said 16 because it's a division of 64. So this 64 is so important that Prabhupada knows you can't go outside of it. In other words, every 4 days you chant the 64, which is you must take on a position of a servant to one of the gopis. One of those gopis is then displaying a specific art or science to the Lord, and you must actually resonate with that, and you must find your way in line so that when this vector equilibrium is expanded, then you perfectly, symmetrically expand with it, and you're part of it. You're not out of sync with anything. At that point, there is no law of karma, because there's nothing going out. It's perfectly in balance. Everything's perfectly symmetric. So, chant your 16 rounds. It's good. But then understand that you can chant more, and that more will purify you more and more. And as you get purified, you'll go to the Lord, and you'll please the Lord more and more. So, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Mahamantra ki, Gaura Premanandi. If you want, I can ask a question before you take prasad, and then take prasad quickly. But otherwise, you have some point. Prabhupada said, you must meditate on Krishna's pastimes. It's actually necessary, Prabhupada mentioned. This is quoted in Mahanidhi Swami's book on the art of chanting. One of Prabhupada's disciples says, what do you think, Prabhupada? Should we chant? Well, he maybe wasn't that blasé about approaching Prabhupada. But Prabhupada should be revered always. He asked, should we think of the pastimes of Radha and Krishna? Is it offensive? And Prabhupada said, it's a must. You have to do this. But he also said you shouldn't concoct things. So therefore, one has to learn. One has to learn the science. That's learned by Shravanam, Kirtanam, and then Vishnu Smaranam is after that. So in relation to chanting on the bus, that's just common sense. If you're not annoying anyone, okay. These days in London, many things go, so people accept it. And then also you can chant silently, and you also get more benefit. If you want to chant loud and people are liking it, good. If you want to chant loud and people are annoyed, then swap to the other way. But all times you must try and think of Krishna. Okay, I'll take Prabhu first. Yeah. He's mentioning that yesterday I said that we should be a servant to knowledge. We should actually be a conduit for knowledge to come through us. Because knowledge is personal. Knowledge is not impersonal. So knowledge needs a person to come through and then give to another. And similarly, bhakti is personal. So when you want to attain advancement in Krishna consciousness, you have to be given that from another person. So when a person sits up here to speak the Bhagavatam, that person has a duty on the Vyasasan to represent Vyasadeva and actually give spiritual benefit into the heart of each and every person listening. One must try to explain the commentary in such a way that one puts enthusiasm into another person. That's the duty of the speaker. So in relation to knowledge, then knowledge is personal, and we must act as a representative or servant. And actually knowledge is time itself. Time is graded in atomic particles, and those atomic particles join together. First 2, and then 6 become a hexagon, and then the hexatom joins with other hexatoms, and it makes space. So time then becomes space, and the way that time is measured is via destruction of the body. It's measured in 4 different ways in the universe. I won't go off the top. If I go on to atomic time, then we're lost. Anyway, time is supposed to join with greater time, and great time is knowledge. And that great time descends through the universe from the top. So knowledge comes from the top, and as you go forwards with time, because your body is made from atomic particles of time, then you access knowledge, and you're supposed to be a conduit for that knowledge to then reach the next person and the next and the next and the next. And that knowledge is supposed to uplift them, because knowledge is heat. And in a thermodynamic universe, as I explained yesterday, heat rises. So as heat rises, the person goes up instead of going down. So if that knowledge is in relation to the Godhead, in relation to something, pravritti marg, the path going up, uplifting people, and you give that knowledge to someone, then that's fine. You're actually getting uplifted. If you're a teacher of woodwork, for instance, and you're teaching children to do wood carvings or different things, that's a completely mundane knowledge, but it's part of the Mahatattva. So it's part of this path of pravritti. So if that person then learns that art, you've taught them, there'll be some reciprocation. There's always action and reaction goes on. If they use that for a demoniac purposes, then it changes. And if you didn't give that in knowledge that they were going to use it for demoniac purposes, you're free from that. You're free from that. But it depends how someone is using that knowledge. The knowledge of splitting the atom, that's a neutral knowledge. So Einstein gave that as his duty as a scientist. So we have duty as a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Brahmin, etc. So he was in that category of Brahmins, and he gave that knowledge to others. Then Eisenhower, what's he called? The one who made this atomic explosion? Oppenheimer, that's it, Oppenheimer. So he then used that knowledge and came further with this atomic bomb, and that was used for destruction. So that same atomic particle, because it produces heat in the explosion, it can be used to produce energy. So the knowledge itself is neutral. How the person uses it can then become polarized for good or evil. And then there's different reciprocations. So knowledge is to answer your question, it's just like this. So you don't actually have a problem in that regard. You just do your duty and give knowledge. But your duty is to be a servant of Krishna. So you give out Krishna conscious knowledge. And if your knowledge is in relation, so we're talking that I'm speaking something to do with science, for instance. So that knowledge, you then try and use that to uplift someone. If there's someone who knows a little about science, you meet them on that path which you resonate with, and then you uplift them from that. So your knowledge can be mundane, but you can use it in service of Krishna, and you can uplift everyone. So it's the job of a very good preacher to find where people are at, and you use that as a platform to inspire them to go further. Yes, Prabhu, you want to give a comment? Yeah. What a foolish thing, eh? What a foolish thing to think that you're the enjoyer, and Krishna, who is knowledge himself, he is the chit potency, and you are time, so you're masculine. So you're the enjoyer, and knowledge then must become subservient to you, and you become the enjoyer of the enjoyed. So you're enjoying Krishna. So Krishna must become feminine. So that feminine then is Durga. Then you've got to fight with Durga's husband, Shiva, Rudra. So you got to be a pretty tough character to beat Shiva. So definitely you're going to get smashed to pieces. So best to be humble and say, please, Lord, just allow me to try and help anyone here, try and help anybody, something small. And then just smash me all you want so that I don't become proud, this type of thing. So, okay, Prabhu, we'll take one more question, then go.
Thank you very much for excellent introduction. I have several questions, but because it's already 9:20, I'll ask you just one.
Yeah, and then we can talk afterwards.
The
Mm.
It actually goes so far as to describe how you have to pronounce, especially the guttural syllables.
Yeah.
And so, for example, it tells you how multiples of 5 syllables can make 30-syllable verses, as in the Mahabharata, for example.
Yeah.
It also tells you something like the 16-bit rhythmic cycle, which is in Indian classical music is very well.
I know it.
So, that being so, is it important, or rather, is it quality versus quantity? Suppose that for some reason one is not able to chant 16 rounds a day.
Yeah.
Okay? But he makes sure, absolutely sure, that he chants every syllable properly.
Mm.
This is one case.
Yeah.
Another case, the guy just rushes through because he knows that quantity is important.
Mm.
But he doesn't pronounce any of the syllables properly.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on this?
Did everyone hear that? It's a very good point, and thank you very much for raising that point. It's very nice. But there are two things mentioned in this question. The first thing is in relation to a certain Veda. So this Veda mentions that one must chant with specific pronunciation. So that specific pronunciation, we're given examples in the Bhagavatam of now Vritrasura, right? There's Vrika and Vitra. Vitra is a demon from... So Vritrasura. His father wanted to get a son to kill Indra, right? So he chanted mantras. At the end of that mantra, you have to chant everything perfect. Prabhu's correct. In this instance... So at the end of that mantra, there was a long air, and it's supposed to chanted up. You know, you start in music, you can have a minor and a major. Hare Krishna, that's a major. Hare Krishna, that's a minor. So one goes down, one goes up. So his father chanted everything perfect except one letter. Hare Krishna. That one letter he chanted in a minor instead of in a major. So instead of getting someone who was going to be an enemy of Indra, he got a son who Indra was an enemy of him. You see? So these syllables are very specific in regards to this. So then Vitrasura was a friend of Indra. He didn't want to kill Indra. He knew everything. Of course, he was pure devotee. King Chitraketu, in a previous life to this, that is. So then he allowed Indra to kill him because Indra was his enemy. And in this way, he could attain love of Godhead. He mentioned that I'll allow you to kill me while I'm thinking of Krishna. But his real purpose was to kill Indra's pride. So his father attained that much, that Vritrasura killed Indra's pride. And Indra was very, very sorry for killing a Brahmana, a Vaishnava devotee. And because of that, did we tell a story yesterday where he had to enter the water? He ran away from sin personified and he entered into the water. And he was starving because the fire god couldn't enter the water to give him some food. So Indra had to have problems because of this. So in relation to the second side of this, which is chanting the Mahamantra, Prabhu was mentioning, should a person chant more and not worry too much about pronunciation, or should he pronounce correctly and then maybe chant less, quality rather than quantity, right? So try to pronounce the Mahamantra correctly. That's very easy because it's not difficult. So unless you have a lisp, and you can't correctly chant the mantra. But then, even then, you may not be able to chant it. But is Lord Chaitanya known as the most cruel, horrible personality of Godhead? Or is he known as the most munificent personality of Godhead? And is it known as Lord Chaitanya accepts everything as an offense because we're all apparatis? Or is it known as Lord Chaitanya doesn't accept any offenses? So chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can make offenses. But devotees first chant the Panchatattva mantra and say to the Lord, "Dear Lord, I'm not perfect, but please assist me because I would like to chant the Mahamantra, so please don't be too offended and make allowances for me." So in this way, a devotee can chant the Mahamantra. As he chants, he doesn't have to pronounce perfect, but if you want to pronounce perfect, good, no problems. It depends what you're thinking when you're chanting the Mahamantra. This was the essence of this class. So if you're thinking of Krishna and you're chanting a certain number, 2 rounds or 4 rounds, that's really good. If you're thinking of Krishna and you're chanting 12 rounds or 16 rounds, that's even better than good. So you have good, you have better, and you have best, and you have everything like this. So the best is to never stop thinking about Krishna, and to never stop chanting the Mahamantra, and to constantly go up and up and up to the higher realms. If you don't want to do that, then you may take as much as you want of the medicine. There's no problem about this. But it depends what you want. Lord Krishna is known as a reciprocal person. So he will reciprocate exactly with how much you want, how much you desire him. So the best thing is, you desire to please the Lord with your chanting. You desire to love the Lord with your chanting, love the Lord with your actions, and always see yourself as a servant of the Lord. In this way you'll win and everyone else will win. I'll close the class here, but I'll mention that I have one book which I wrote, and I'm leaving today. I have a few copies, and I'll maybe put 5 copies in the bookshop, and then I'm not bringing from India because it's so far away to bring, so heavy. So they're £4.50, and if anybody wants one, it explains, it's called The Underlying Principle of Everything. So I've tried to explain the Lord in scientific terms for normal devotees, for all common devotees, and for external preaching. So anyway, they're quite a thick book, but if you like to read, it's very nice. So let's end it there and say, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Radha London Ishvara and Radha Gokulananda, all glories to Sri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman.